Well, hello. I want to take the time out to say thank you to everyone that is joining this live stream. And today I have a special guest by the name of Anne from Plant Obsessed. So I'm going to bring her up and let her talk about herself. How's it going, Anne?
Oh, pretty good. Almost Friday, so
Yep, muddy thumbs up.
yes. Kind of.
Oh, go ahead.
So, what do you want to know?
Let's talk about some urban myths about worm farming. First of all, introduce yourself and let us know how you got into worm farming.
So Anne, from Central Illinois. I have just about every kind of worm that is not an invasive species. I have the red wigglers, the European night crawlers, the African night crawlers, and the blue worms. And I got into worm farming because of my bonsai. I stupidly got into a really kind of expensive hobby of growing little miniature trees and found out that everything is expensive. The pots are expensive, the soil's expensive, the fertilizer is expensive. And I kept hearing everybody say worm castings, worm castings. And I look it up and it's like $5 a pound. And I'm like, no way. I am not paying $5 a pound for worm poop. I mean, that should be free. So I thought, I'll just go buy myself some worms and they will poop and then I will steal their poop and there we go. So that's how it started. And here we are 5 years later. And I pretty much started the channel because I had watched a bunch of other worm farming channels and they didn't really always answer my questions, or maybe it wasn't specific enough or I don't know. So I started the channel so people could tell me what to do.
So question for you real quick before we get started. Okay. Do you do worms yourself? Your husband has nothing to do with that, or how does that work?
It's all me. It's all me. If I go on a trip or a business trip or something like that, I make sure that the worm babies are all taken care of before I leave. Yeah, it's just me. I mean, he'll help shred paper and he'll, anytime he's cooking, he'll put the food scraps in a bag and throw it in the freezer for me. But as far as actually going and feeding the worms, nope.
I hear you. My wife and my kids are the same way. It's a one-man army.
Well, okay, my son's actually got his own worm bin now. He's working on 2. And at first it was, hey, why don't you bring your scraps over and I'll feed them to the worms. And he was like, it's a lot of work to drag all my junk to your house. And he's like, can't I just get some worms of my own? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I will bring you worms right now. And so he's gone from just like a tote, like a regular sweater tote, like most people start with. And he's been pretty much doing it himself ever since. Every once in a while, when I go see him, it's, he's like, do you think it's wet enough? What do you think? And I was like, you could watch my channel, right? And he's like, I've got you. I don't need the channel. I'm like,
go straight to the source.
Right, exactly. He's like, I don't need the channel. I'll just call you and tell you what's going on.
So what does he have? Is it red wigglers or European night crawlers?
He just got a big scoop out of blue. So he's got the reds, the Euros, and the blue mix. Just the yield mix I got from Uncle Jim's back in the day for back when worms were $25 a pound.
Yeah, they were cheaper back in the day.
Yeah, that ship has sailed. I think the last worms that I bought from Garden Worm Lady. But that was to replace the African night crawlers that I lost when I got COVID overseas. I lost quite a few of them. It dried out too much. So I had bought those to backfill. And African night crawlers are more expensive generally than red wigglers and European night crawlers anyway. I think back in the day. Yeah.
And your African night crawlers, they still have their size compared to European night crawlers, how they lose their size, or are they skinnier now? Okay.
Yeah, they were huge. I mean, they were the size of Sharpies when I got them. Huge.
Oh wow.
Just massive. And I've had them for probably the new ones. I've had them for about a year now. And, you know, you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference between them and the red wigglers.
Oh, okay. All right. So now
If you
let's
don't
talk
keep
about
at 'em-
what.
Yeah, if you don't keep at them with worm chow all the time, they lose the size right away. Next generation shrinks up.
And they're African night crawlers, correct me if I'm wrong, they're more that cardboard and leaves. Is that what they prefer?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I haven't done any sort of, you know, experiment where I put just cardboard on one side and just food scraps on the other. But they go through leaves and shredded cardboard like nothing I've ever seen. It is nuts. And even when they're smaller worms, when the generations go by and they're not the big, huge worms anymore, their castings are still much bigger, like coffee grounds. You know, whereas the red wigglers and stuff, it's real fine, even without sifting them. The African night crawlers have got big castings. Even, I don't know, they're a completely different genus of worm from the red wigglers. So I guess it's, you know, there's going to be some difference.
I definitely understand that. They're pretty worms. If I had the area where it was warmer, because you know we both live in the Midwest and it's hard to keep a tropical worm like that. So, and yours are upstairs? Is that where you keep yours?
Yeah, mine is on the same floor with the people, whereas the rest of the worms are in the basement. And even so, I live in a big farmhouse that doesn't have great insulation. So, you know, when it gets to be midwinter and it's, you know, 30 below outside, you know, it's probably 63 degrees Fahrenheit in here.
Okay.
I take a seed mat, I'm just going to stuff it down the side of the vermi bag. And that worked really well last winter. As long as I keep the moisture up and put that seed mat there, they all just kind of snuggle up on that one side of the worm bin and they seem to do pretty good. But I had them in the basement to begin with when I bought them the first time. And it gets down to about 55 degrees in the basement. I probably lost half of them within a couple of months. So I learned the hard way, which is, you know, one of the things I always talk about on my channel is I make epic mistakes so other people can learn from me and so they don't have to.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm the same way. It's like you might as well, you know, share what you know, which we both do, and you know that's part of life. Keep share and help others out.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about a few myths. I heard that you have to have grit in a worm bin. Is that correct, or is that a myth?
I think it doesn't. You don't have to. I did an experiment for a couple of years where I excluded any form of grit, no sand, no eggshell. And the worms reproduced just as fast as the other worms. They ate about the same. I actually think that it helps them, but it's not necessary. I mean, I think if you didn't use it, you'd still be okay. You could still have worms that eat stuff and you can get castings.
So if you're new, you would just advise people just put eggshells in there anyway.
Correct? I would. I still do. I mean,
Yeah.
my son goes through a ton of eggs. And so I have more than enough eggshells. So I will always put that in with my prepared bedding, even though I know it's not 100% necessary. All else fails, the plants will use the calcium.
I hear you. That's right. So what myths have you busted now? You know, there's so many out there. They said you can't put onions in a worm bin. Is that correct?
That is not correct. And, you know, I always started off a little bit at a time, you know, because I wasn't ever trying to hurt my worms, you know, and I put a couple little pieces of onion in there just, you know, off to one side to see. And it was gone. And I thought, okay, maybe it's the other critters in the bin, you know, and then I put it, you know, at one point I put a whole onion in there. And the next thing I know, I open up the bin and there's actually worms inside this mostly intact onion. I mean, they were in there on purpose. I mean, they could have been any place else in that worm bin and they were inside the onion. So it is obviously not hurting them at all. And I put onions in and they disappear. So I think everybody's happy with them eating onions.
I hear.
Pretty much.
So what other myths have you busted?
Hot peppers.
Okay.
It's been a long time ago, but I did do a video where I had been making applesauce and I had also been making salsa, you know, garden stuff. And I took one of the bins, and I don't know if you've ever used like a food processor. Basically, it takes all of the skins and the seeds and all of that and spits it out one side, and then just the paste comes out.
Okay.
And you use that for like hot sauce. So everything that in theory the peppers, you know, that makes peppers hot, which is the seeds and the placenta thing, anything that could have, if it was me with my own hands, it would have burned me. And I put that on one side of the bin, and then I took the apple peelings and put it on the other side of the bin. They actually ate the peppers faster. When I went into that bin in a week or so, all of the worms were over on the hot pepper side, eating on the leftover salsa, and they weren't even working on the apples yet.
Oh, that's crazy. And you don't put seeds in it. You don't use the pepper seeds, do you? You don't add like pepper seeds in your worm bin?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Seeds and all. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Seeds and all. Of course, the tomatoes, the tomato seeds in particular, come back to haunt me every spring. They don't seem to germinate all winter, but then I tell you, you put those castings outside and you've got like 50 tomato plants growing, and you're like, great.
Oh, wow. I hear you. But, so, oh, you go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I'm just saying they'll eat those too. If they grow sprouts, you just flip it over, and then the worms eat the sprouts. It's all food.
Do you put meat in your worm bins? Have you ever attempted that or not?
Yeah.
Okay. Eggs. You put eggs.
It seems like they will eat it. I mean, it can't be their only source of food, I don't think, but they will eat it. My biggest thing was it attracted flies really bad. Yeah. It was terrible. I tried covering it up with probably 6 inches of paper so that it couldn't be smelled by the bugs. Well, the bugs had better noses than I gave them credit for, because that bin was a pain in my behind for as long as I ran that experiment. I mean, they ate chicken, they ate raw eggs, they ate, raw chicken, cooked chicken, eggs, raw eggs, deer. They didn't like deer meat very well. My husband had some deer burger that had kind of, went off in the freezer. That took the longest out of every kind of meat, beef, pork, chicken. That all went pretty fast. They did not like the deer meat for whatever reason.
So did you put in like all types of worm bins, like European night crawlers or just red wigglers?
No, there was just one bin of mixed worms that I fed them the meat. And it did go. I mean, I put a lot of bedding in there, and they did eat the meat. Nobody ever got protein poisoning. Protein poisoning, that's kind of a myth in its own. It's not from protein. It's actually like a fermentation. Like when people eat things and it gives them gas, worms don't have any mechanism to burp or anything. The gas just literally blows them up.
Oh, wow.
So that's what protein poisoning is. It's actually they've eaten something that will ferment in their stomach or their crop and gizzard, and it blows them up. And that's why it ends up looking like pop beads, like little kids' toys. So I don't know if they eat things, they get into their mouth that haven't started to break down yet, and that was the only option for them to eat. I've never seen it other than feeding worm chow.
Okay.
That's the only time I've ever seen it at all in any other kind of food that I've fed.
Okay. Tell us about, can you talk about peat moss? Is there peat moss you wouldn't put in a worm bin compared to peat moss you would use in a worm bin? Because don't some peat moss have fertilizer chemicals, correct?
I don't know. Around here, there's only one kind of peat moss to even buy. It comes in the green block. I don't know if you've seen it.
No,
it's just Canadian peat moss. That's all that we have available around here. I know
Okay.
some people are concerned because it's does have a high acidity level according to people. I've not tested it. I sift it and use the larger pieces for my bonsais, and I use the small for either seed starting or for the worm bedding to help the paper bedding to keep it from clumping. I think as far as peat moss goes, most of my problem with peat moss is that it's just not very sustainable.
Okay.
You know, it takes thousands and thousands of years to create just a little bit, whereas you could buy coconut coir, and that's a byproduct of an industry it's just waste. So, I mean, I tend to rinse the coconut coir out because it could have salt in it.
Okay.
Which is probably just best practice. If you don't have an EC or an electrical conductivity meter that tells you basically it's the thing that tells you if you have hard water or not.
Okay.
If that, I mean, for when you're looking at like fish tanks and stuff, there's just a little meter. I don't know where mine is. This is my pH meter that you can just, put in some liquid and it'll tell you what the pH is. It comes in a kit, and it also has a conductivity meter, and it's the same sort of thing. It tells you how many particles, not really molecules, that are in the liquid. And so if you rinse out your coconut coir and check it with that meter, it will tell you if there's salt in there.
Okay.
And so you can basically add a bunch of water to your coconut coir, rinse it and drain it, and then keep doing that until that number gets really low. I'm not really sure what a good number is. I like to get it under 50.
Okay.
But there are certain brands that are I haven't had any problems with. I'm not sure if you have a brand that you have links to or anything, but just the old Mother Earth brand is what I buy.
Okay.
And if that's not available, I mean, I've checked every time I've bought it, and it's never had high conductivity.
Okay.
So whenever it is I buy a different brand, like a Walmart or something, I do rinse it and check. And sometimes those, the cheap bricks, it will have a little bit of salt in there.
Okay.
Which is bad for the worms because it'll pull water out of them. I mean, have you ever had snail problems and you take salt and you just put it on the you put it on the slugs and those slugs, it'll do the same thing with worms.
Yeah, when we were kids, we always did that. When you're seeing slugs, you do it.
Yep. Works on snails too.
Someone said something. Can you see it on the screen?
It says, I learned the hard way that unrinsed coconut coir is bad for seed starting for the same reason. Plants don't like salt either. So yeah, it depends on the brand. Like I said, I try and stick to that one brand, but if I have to go to a different one, then I rinse it really well, let it dry out again, and then sift it. But yeah, the salt kills seedlings straight up.
So what food would you not want to put in a worm bin?
I think
go ahead.
There's certain things that just stink, right? So if I had a really shallow bed, really shallow bin that I couldn't hide, like mine are in my basement. I mean, it's 10, 15 feet below me. I'm not going to smell anything that happens down there. But I tell you, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, if you have a lot of worms and you feed a small amount, you probably won't see it or smell it. But if you put like a whole cabbage in a worm bin that's the size of like a bus bin, if you put a lot of cabbage in something that shallow, you are going to smell it and it's going to be terrible. Yeah, any kind of brassica like that, it will stink.
I hear you. And haven't you given your worms cottage cheese or something on one of your videos?
Yeah, I probably did. Probably cottage cheese. There was like shredded cheese. I had a friend that was moving. For a while, the worms had a godmother, Cece. And so she was just giving me everything that was in her, pantry that was old. So we got to do a lot of experimenting. So yeah, I think I gave some cottage cheese, but it wasn't enough to really, it had a lot of mites. Like it collected a lot of mites for real.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they ate it eventually. I mean, it didn't cause any problems, but I think anytime you get a food that's hard to eat that the worms can't get to, all the helpers in the bin are going to reproduce like crazy. And that's when you're going to see a whole bunch of brown mites and white mites. And I've seen the red ones, which can be a little aggressive, I think. I don't know if you've seen it, but to me, if you see anything riding on a worm, it's usually those reddish color mites.
Okay.
They're kind of the cleaners, you know. They eat anything that's dead or dying. And, you know, it's unpleasant for us to look at our worms and see them as some other critter's food, but it's true. But yeah, so I've fed different kinds of cheese and stuff, and it's always gone away, but it's caused a bloom of mites.
So are the mites different? I mean, like, well, like you said, there's brown mites, red mites. Do they like, will any of them eat the worms or anything? Or
I think there's thousands of kinds of mites. I'm not an expert, but from what I've read, some of them they just like mold and things like that. But then when you get towards the brown ones and the white ones are supposed to be into mold and things like that. But then like when you get into the red ones, they're kind of like primary carnivores. Like they'll eat the other mites and the springtails and worm cocoons and, you know, dying worms and stuff. And then of course there's lots of different kind of mites. I mean, you've got them. It's not the same as the plant mites.
so
yeah.
do you ever like try to bait your mites out of your worm bin? Like some people like Patrick uses bread, or you do? Or
I think I did it with the like a watermelon or any kind of melon or pumpkin or something. But yeah, just kind of put it flesh side down, give it a couple days, pick it up, and then you can see them all on there. And you just rinse it under the sink and put it back. And you can do that quite a few times on one piece of, I mean, the bread always got soggy for me and it was gross, but gross is relative, I guess.
I hear you. Excuse me. So how often do you feed your worms on average?
Nowadays, it's about every 3 weeks.
Okay. You have less people in your house, correct? I mean, like I'm an empty nester now, and so do you get food scraps from your garden still, or friends, or how do you still keep your produce coming?
Right now, it's a lot of garden waste right now.
Okay.
But when it gets into winter, my friend that was moving that kept giving me all the stuff, she's moved far away now, so she doesn't bring me scraps. My husband actually thinks that he eats more fruits and vegetables because I need the peels for the worms.
I hear you. That's right.
He's like, did we need 20 bananas? Yes, of course we needed 20 bananas. It's not my fault if they go bad and you didn't eat them. Guess we'll have to feed them to the worms.
Exactly. I definitely hear you.
Yeah, so he's like, you know, I'm sick of cantaloupe. Do we really need another cantaloupe? Yep, totally do. So yeah, they get a few things like that.
So for a new person starting out, do you have any tips that you would recommend them? You know, like say I didn't know anything about worm farming. Can you tell me like why I should start or something? Or, you know, worms are gross. It's like just I don't want my hands
I would say that, you know, you don't really have to interact with the worms that much. I mean, so doing the right thing and not putting things in the garbage, I mean, that's just being a good person. Not adding to the landfill to basically make mountains out of literal garbage. I would say that, if they're kind of squeamish about it at first, get a good size bin and, put a lot of paper, shredded cardboard, leaves, get it to the good moisture and put your worms in there. And you don't have to touch your worms like, I do. You don't have to mess with them. I mean, we have worm channels. People watch us on purpose to see us get in there and touch the worms and see what the worms are doing. But, just ye old worm farmer doesn't need to get in there and mess with them as much as we do for, to be on camera. My son doesn't mess with his hardly at all. He just kind of like scoots over the bedding, drops the food in, covers it back up. And the next time he's got food, he puts it in, he does like pocket feeding, you know what I mean? And he doesn't mess with them at all. I mean, every once in a while, he'll kind of like feel it to see if it's wet or dry. But he doesn't even really harvest it that much. I don't know that he's ever harvested it, and he's been doing it for over a year. He just uses it a place to hide his food scraps and, dead plants and stuff like that. So, I mean, you don't really have to do it like I do, which is for the castings for the plants. You can just use it as a disposal method, and you don't have to push the worms at all.
Exactly. That's awesome. Tell your son, congratulations on his worm farming journey.
Yep.
I hear you. Nana, Sandra had a question for you.
Let's see. Do you treat all your castings the same in your garden, or do you restrict the use of some? Oh, yeah. So for the meat experiment, I did put that in with the ornamentals. Just because superstition, not because of any sort of science. But the times where I've fed a little bit of cheese or there was Thanksgiving stuffing, like after Thanksgiving stuffing, where you just put everything together. So there's little tidbits of meat and everything in with the stuffing. That went in the regular worm bin, and I fed that to the garden with the food that I eat.
You got me hungry now talking about stuffing.
Right? Oh. We're getting close.
I can't wait. I love this turkey and stuff. Turkey and stuffing.
Absolutely. Let's see. Yeah. On my vacation, I went to Canada, and they had, like your normal, like if you go to the mall or whatever, they had like a garbage can for regular garbage, recycling, and then compost, things that were compostable. And that was pretty standard, like no matter where you went. They had 3 bins: organic waste, recycling, and actual trash. I mean, that would be great if everybody did that, but I don't know about where you work, but it's hard to get people to understand what recycling is even about. I'm not the person who takes care of it where I work, but I flip open the bin and see what people are recycling, putting pizza in there, and I'm like, dude, pizza is not recyclable. Not by the recycling people, but just people using it as another garbage can or just not caring,
Yep. Even the pizza boxes, you can put those in a worm bin, instead of
100%. Yep.
Because a lot of places don't take their cardboard, that type of stuff, because of the grease, I guess, for warehouses,
right?
Because of rats or something. But if you have a worm bin, tear it up and put it in your worm bin. They'll eat that up.
The Casey's boxes don't go through the shredder very good. Like that orange part seems to be made out of something else. I've like pulled that out and I was like, uh-oh. Well,
I hear you. So you leave stickers on your food every now and then?
I do.
Put your food scraps in? Yeah, it happens.
Avocado stickers, banana stickers. The worms will just eat around it, and then when the worms seem to kind of push things out of the way. I don't know if you've noticed that, but if you accidentally put something plastic in there, they'll kind of just edge it up. And then when you take the top off, you're like, oh, okay, well, there's a piece of plastic and there's a sticker, and you put it in the garbage.
Exactly.
I'm not 100% sure if they're doing it on purpose or if it just seems that way, but that's find that quite often, that stickers are pushed up to the top.
Exactly.
Yep.
I think Sandra put like Amazon tape in her boxes, and that's no good. They won't eat that at
Some of
all.
it, I think they changed the recipe. I think back when I was doing the lasagna bin, where I was just putting layers of cardboard and not shredding it at all, some of that totally went away. And then it was probably close to about a year ago. All of a sudden, the Amazon tape didn't dissolve in the worm bin anymore.
Oh, okay.
So there was brown paper tape with like fiber in it back a year or so ago, and that went away completely. But nowadays, I don't see that kind of tape. And the kind of tape I accidentally leave in there, it doesn't go away. It has to get pulled out and put in the garbage.
Yep. I know if I have Amazon boxes, I just like tear as much of the card tape off and shred it up and put it in my worm bin.
Yep. I pull it off now. They must have, being environmentally friendly must not have been, must not have been worth the money.
Exactly. Let's see what Rick said. We have those issues in Australia. Some minorities of people don't care if it fits. Put it
right.
Yeah.
It
right.
ruins it.
Right.
It ruins it for everybody else. It's like, I'm the person that goes around, yells at everybody like, hey, that soda can could have went in the recycling.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of people are trying really hard to pay attention to the rules so that we can try and keep things out of the landfill, and other people are just jerks.
Yeah, exactly. Don't care.
They just are jerks and just put whatever, like he said, whatever fits in the bin. They're too lazy to go across the, hallway to the garbage can. They just put it in the recycling bin because it's easy.
I mean, even look at Target. You go to store the trash on the ground. I'm like, you got to go right by that stinking trash can.
Yeah.
It's like you.
Yeah, it makes you mad. It's like, stop being all about yourself and look at society. It's not like I'm some sort of, crazy hippie or whatever, but I'm like, come on, it's common sense. You wouldn't do that in your own yard and leave trash laying around in your own yard. You'd pick it up. Why would you just leave it around?
Yeah, I think the thing that makes me mad is just our oceans with all that plastic and the fish are eating it. And, the turtles get the stuff around their neck from the 6-pack holders. And it's like, people just don't care. It's like, oh, man. Cause and effect.
Hopefully, we're getting some mechanical things. I saw it on, I don't know, Reddit or something. They actually have like this machine/boat that goes around and kind of skims off the plastic that floats, but not all of it floats. Some of it gets stuck.
Exactly.
Let's see. Unit living high-rise apartments. I didn't really understand what Rick said there.
I guess he lives. Okay. I guess maybe Rick's talking about like the environment of like apartment dwellers.
Yeah.
I guess they don't like to recycle. I guess they'll just throw it. It says, paper, cardboard only. They'll probably put aluminum cans in a paper place or something. But everyone's not like I said, stop worrying about yourself. And that's the problem. I noticed that lately with people. They just
selfish.
It's all about me. Like Toby Keith said, that one song.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, generations, it's gotten better. You look at our parents' generation, they didn't even know what recycling was. The closest thing to recycling they had when I was a kid was when you had to take all the glass bottles back to the store to get your money back.
Yeah.
That was the only recycling.
But we are starting to kind of come around because they used to bury everything back in the day too.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, I find some crazy things. I live in a real old house and I also garden a lot. Digging around the house, putting in flower beds or something like that. I find windows. I find like pulley systems. I'm like, why on earth would you bury a whole pulley system next to your house? That just doesn't make any sense to me. Tools, dishes, craziness.
Exactly. I hear you.
Oh, I see what he's saying. There's only one place to put your garbage. They don't have a place to divide it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Rick, question real quick for you, Rick. What time is it right now in Australia? Yeah, I don't know the time zone. And what time zone are you in? Because Ann and I are both in Central Time.
Yeah.
So let's see. Do you do workshops or anything, Ann?
Well, I've done a couple of them. I used to belong to um, like a campground a
Mm-hmm.
long time ago, and they contacted me and said they wanted. So it's lunchtime tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
over where Rick is. No, but they asked me to, come by and give a talk about worms, and fishing is one of the big things they do at the campground.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they just wanted kids to see the worms and learn about them, and maybe get interested in growing some for the campground. But yeah, that was one time, and I did one at a plant sale one time, but
Okay.
not. Have you started? I heard you had done that a couple of times.
I
Didn't
did
you?
one. I did
Just
one
one?
at a white. Yeah, I need to touch base with some other people and see if I can go to like different towns and just try to educate a few other people. I like doing it. People said they really like, the workshops because a lot of stuff they don't know about. And I was the same way. I didn't know anything about worms, and I never knew they would eat that. I just thought they're just
Yeah.
for fishing. But
Yep.
yeah,
Exactly.
we've come a long way over the years with our knowledge, and you and I both, and everyone, majority of the people that watch YouTube are learning daily
Yeah.
about.
And that, I mean, that's why I love YouTube, is that
Mhm,
it doesn't matter what it is, I can type it in there and I can learn how to do something.
mhm,
And there's always going to be bad knowledge out there, but
mhm,
you have to sort through it and kind of get the
mhm.
majority. I mean, back when I was first starting, there was maybe only 3 or 4 worm channels that I knew of.
Yep.
And you kind of watched all of them and thought, well, whatever they
Mhm.
all agree on must be right.
Exactly.
And whatever it is that they don't
Exactly.
agree about might be a gray area. I might be able to get
That's
away with.
right. That's
Uh,
right.
like
Yep.
what was it? Dryer lint. I tried
Yep.
that. Oh no.
Yeah,
No.
they won't eat it, will they?
That did not work. Cleaning out the
Mm-mm.
dog brush, that didn't work.
They don't eat that either. They don't eat dog hair.
Uh,
I mean, it's,
apparently not pug hair. But I've got cats too, and they just, I brushed them out, and then I got the fuzzball and buried it, and I ended up taking it back out again, just putting it
Mhm.
outside.
Yeah. I The reason I don't do the dry lint is because of the synthetic materials, all the man-made crap.
Yep, I
But
think that's it.
yeah,
Exactly.
remember when things used to be like real, all natural? Now it's they cut corners and make it more expensive for cheaper
Mhm.
products.
Yeah, the towels, and that's the funny, because the towels that I bought from you,
Uh huh.
they don't have lint.
Nope.
Um,
Yeah.
and I threatened everybody within an inch of their life. I said, "Don't you dare wash them towels without me."
Yeah. Exactly.
And everybody's
Yep.
like, "Well, am I not supposed to use soap, or I'm not supposed to use
No.
dry?" I'm like, "No, no, no, that's not the point. The point
Yeah.
is that it's microfiber, and it'll suck up the lint from the other stuff, and
Yeah.
then it won't be
Yep.
microfiber anymore." And so finally, like,
Exactly.
nobody would wash towels. They're like, "That's it. We're not
Yep.
washing any towels." And I'm like, "No, you can wash the other ones." "Nope, we're done. No
Yeah.
more. We're not washing any of the towels." I'm like,
Exactly.
"Okay, that's
Yeah.
my job."
Yeah. And I was honest with you. Like
Yeah,
says when
yeah.
when it
I'm
comes
glad
with
you
me, I
told
don't.
me. I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like. But people do that. Some people don't want to tell you the truth. But yeah, I'm like, those are the best towels I've ever used, and
Right.
that's
And
all
you
I
got to
use
take care
now.
of them right,
Yeah.
or they
Exactly.
won't be. They'll be shop rags,
Exactly.
expensive shop
Exactly.
rags.
That's right.
Yep.
So I have a situation again. My
Uh-oh.
worms are starting to come back to the top of the lid. You remember? Because the weather's
Change.
starting to change
Yep.
and they
Change of
know it.
season.
Yep. So
Yep.
yep, Here we go.
Not
again.
that anybody got to see my red wigglers the other day, but when I took that lid off, they were all over the place. I was like, come on, guys. But you figure around here right now, it's 55 degrees.
Yeah.
And we got up to 75 today, but you know,
That's
it's
nice.
been getting pretty cool. We've had a couple of frosts already. And so I've shut the basement up and try and keep it as I've taken all my hot peppers downstairs, took my fig plants downstairs, trying to rescue everything from winter. So now the worms have got plant roommates for the rest of the year until middle of May.
I hear you. So you do have one worm bin outside all year, correct or not?
I do.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And how is that going? How's that one going for you?
I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't looked at it. It was actually pushed back against the back of the house, and like I had all of the figs in front of it, and they're super heavy, right? When they're wet. And I was like, well, I had jammed it full of food in the spring when they started to wake up, but they actually did. They made it all the way through the winter, and you know how cold it gets here.
Yeah.
I mean, it freezes solid 6 feet down. And I just tried to make all those like food burritos out of things that I knew would kind of hot compost.
Okay.
So I just kind of like hid little hot compost pockets all around that worm bin. And when I opened it back up again in March, there was live worms, not baby worms, but full-grown worms running around. So I honestly don't know if they can freeze solid and thaw out and be okay, or if just being protected by that hot compost was enough to get them through the winter. I'm not really sure. I've heard the cocoons can, but I haven't heard that the worms themselves can freeze solid. But I think that's what happened, if I had to guess.
So what about rice? They say rice heats up. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. That's one of those things that it's a good idea to make sure that it's super soggy. Like I wouldn't put anything right out of your rice cooker into there. I'd make sure you like put it in a bowl with some water and let it hydrate 100%, and don't put it all in the same place, because it will get some serious, really hard, crusty mold on it. That blue mold that's like Smurf blue. And it will turn hard as a rock. You'll have to, you know, I've had to take it out again and put it in water to soak it, to put it back in the bin and just kind of like mix it all in. It, a lot of things have the potential to heat up, any kind of fruit or grain. That's why I've always been an advocate of using a lot of bedding. You know, that's one of the things, I don't know if you can agree, but for new worm farmers, getting their mind wrapped around to the fact that bedding is food and that you don't need as much people food as you think you do. The worms will be totally fine if you just give them cardboard, shredded cardboard, or even not. Just, you know, office paper that's wadded up, that's wet. They'll eat it. And that they don't need people food as much as you think. They can survive on less.
See if anyone has any more questions for you. But yeah, go ahead and spill some of your knowledge. Talk about, I don't know, give tips on what you should do. Like when you first start, you know, you barely feed them, right? Don't give them too much food.
Absolutely. Like if people start with a pound of worms and they're like, okay, I'm going to feed them as soon as I get them. Don't do that. You know, take the worms, put them in the worm bin that you've made with the damp bedding, and leave them alone for 3 or 4 days. Don't mess with them. Don't touch them. Don't feed them. And then after they've kind of calmed down, because they kind of go in shock, you know. I mean, if I was to take a handful of worms and make a new bin, they wouldn't be in shock, because it's like moving from the living room to the kitchen.
Yeah, I try it.
But if you get brand new worms that is not your own, they go through shock of being shipped, dried out, because that's how they have to move them. We learned that on Mimi's video, that they kind of dry them out a bit to ship them. They got to rehydrate. They got to acclimate to your temperature and moisture, and get out of being in shock. And so that's the biggest thing. When you first get worms, do not feed them. Put them in bedding. Don't give them people food. And the whole, a pound of worms will eat a pound of food a day. No, don't do that. That is a good way to kill all of your worms every time. People see me, and I as I'm feeding 2 gallons of food into Blue, which is 55 gallons of worm bin, people are like, oh, you're overfeeding. And I'm like, I literally have almost 6 foot long bed. It's a foot deep. 2 pounds of food or 2 gallons of food is nothing in the greater, 2 gallons of milk in 55. That's nothing. One handful, like if you have a pound of worms, the smallest handful to start with, and then absolutely just wait for the food to go away. And if it took 4 days for it to go away, then 4 days is your thing.
That's
and
right.
3 or 4 months later, when the worm population's doubled, you put a handful of food in there and it's gone in 2 days, do a bigger handful. And that's, you need to do it incrementally. You can't just automatically think, poof, I'm going to feed a gallon of food. I got a gallon of worms. Because worms don't eat the same amount in the winter as they do in the summer.
That's right.
Baby worms seem to go through way more food than adults. If you've got a ton of hatchlings, like in the spring, I don't know if you've seen it in your bins, but in the spring, you just see a crazy amount of baby worms, and they will start blowing through the food like crazy.
Yeah, they're real tiny too.
Super tiny, like little bits of thread. And they eat a ton of food. But yeah, that is the biggest tip, is to absolutely one small handful of food, count the days that it took for them to finish that 100%, and then write it down if you can't remember, if you're busy. Set yourself a reminder on your phone, like, do not feed before, Wednesday or whatever it is.
That's right.
Because then if it goes sour, then you're going to be putting like ammonia and CO2 into the air spaces around the bedding, and that could kill the worms as well. It's not just heating up that can kill them, it's the vapors that's in the bin. So those are the kind of mistakes that I've made. I used to feed tons of apples because I had apple trees. And one corner of the worm bin would smell like a brewery, because it would start fermenting and all the worms would be hiding on the other side of the bin. And I was like, oops, sorry guys, let's put some bedding in there. Live and learn the hard way every time.
So I know worms are expensive, but it's a good investment. It's a one-time investment. But when someone's starting out, would you recommend purchasing at least 2 pounds of worms? Or what's your regular for someone that wants to get started?
For someone that wants to get started, that's not in a big rush, it's coming into fall. If you're in the top side, down under in Australia, of course, they're coming into their growth season. But especially if you're going into fall, handful of worms, you could pick up, I can't remember who it is, but they started selling starter worm packs that had bedding and castings and worms and baby worms and cocoons in it. And they sell kind of like a starter pack. I totally would do that every time. You don't, every one of the worm cocoons, if it's red wigglers, you're going to get 4 or 5 babies. Not always, but most of the time you'll get 4 or 5 babies out of every cocoon. So if you only start out with a 1/4 pound, you don't need to spend $80 on a full pound of worms. Get a 1/2 pound, get a 1/4 pound, and just be patient, because they will multiply to the point where you have too many worms. I give away probably 5 pounds of worms at least a year to people who want them. But because of the way I feed my worms, they're not big. I was feeding up a couple bins to keep them fat for fishing, but I just don't have time to fish that much anymore. So they just get regular people scraps and Amazon boxes, and so they don't get very big. None of my worms are like the big monsters they were when I bought them. But I would absolutely start with red wigglers or European night crawlers. And I wouldn't buy more than a 1/2 pound if you're starting out. If you've already got worms and you want to expand your herd, that's totally different. But just starting out, just let them grow on their own.
Mm-hmm. You're one of the goats of worm farming. So, because I think you're the first one to talk about the wedge method. I never really heard that term until you said it.
Yeah.
So, would you mind explaining what it is, or?
I found one guy who actually he must have been part of a farm. I can't even find the channel now, but he was a farmer that it was just like an experiment. And what he did was he had a big long trough. It wasn't like a barrel or anything, it was a trough. And he was doing it because he had access. And so he put, let's see, where are my hands? So he put all of his worms and manure and food scraps and sawdust here. And then he'd come back the next week when he had more stuff and he'd collapse that and scoot it over and then add more to the end. And he'd just leave this stuff alone. And then every time that he had more stuff, he'd just squish it together again and add more stuff to the end. And then, you know, the idea was that the worms will travel with the new food and basically they'll keep creeping towards the new side and leave the old side. And then you can get in there with a shovel and get you a couple shovelfuls on the old side. And then you don't have to mess with the worms. You don't have to divide them out. You don't have to light harvest them or anything. You can just do that. And it took a while. It probably took 6 months to build up that 55-gallon barrel.
Oh, wow.
To get enough of a mass going. Like you have to get halfway before the worms even start moving. I mean, that stuff has to mature. The worms have to go through it a couple of times. But it probably takes 6 months to get the mass for the worms to leave it and want to move to the new food.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is, and patience. That is the big thing.
Yeah,
Everybody's got to be patient, and
You're
it's
right.
hard. I am not a patient person. I am not a patient. I mean, I've dug up tulips or crocuses, and like, what are you guys doing in there? Come on, when am I going to get my flowers? Let's go. We're on schedule. It's April 15th. I want tulips, you know? And so I'm not a patient person. And so worm farming teaches patience because you are not going to make them do that. You cannot boss worms around. You just can't.
That's right.
They're going to do what they want. You can try and the best thing to do is whatever it is your worms are wanting to do, do that. Because like I'm trying that vertical tower thing right now.
Okay.
Oh my God. It is a train wreck. Like my brain just hasn't wrapped around how to make worms go vertical.
Yeah.
I am struggling.
I hear you.
And I think it's, you know, people are like, why would you put a video out there where you're sucking at life? And I'm like, because people need to know that it is not a walk in the park. Worm farming can be difficult. And not, you can't say absolutely. I mean, we're both in the Midwest with similar type areas. So you and I can talk back and forth and say, this is what works in the spring. This is what works in the winter. But, you know, people in Florida, they need to listen to Patrick. I mean, because he'll know, what do you do in a hurricane? What do you do when it gets to be 100 degrees outside? You know, if you're up in New York, you should be, you know, listening to Northeast Worms or whoever else is up there. Yeah, because they know what to do in that kind of weather. You can get generalized advice from just about anybody, but when it comes down to it, people are like, oh, they're like, oh, well, my African night crawlers never crawl anywhere. I'm like, I live on a highway with heavy truck traffic.
Yeah, that makes a difference.
You know what Caterpillar is, right? Caterpillar tractors. Yeah. It's its home base is around where I live, so they have a lot of warehouses, and so there are earth-moving trucks and wheels and tracks and all that stuff going back and forth in front of my house 24 hours a day. That vibration drives them nuts. You know, most people are like, oh, I wouldn't spend $300 for a vermi bag. I have to. After my urban worm bag broke, those things were all over the place. It was horrible. I know that my husband opened up the door to the plant room, which is where I'm at now. And he was like, what is going on here? I mean, they were everywhere, everywhere.
Oh man.
Dead,
Wow.
dead and crawling,
Oh.
and it was terrible. And
Yeah.
so, I got another bag system to keep them zipped in, because without that zipper, they run amok. And it's not the temperature, it's not the moisture, it's not the food I eat or give them, it's the vibrations that just drive them nuts. I feel compelled to keep going. I don't like to give up ever. So I'm going to figure out African night crawlers if it kills me or them.
I understand. I definitely understand where you're coming
Yeah, I
from.
like figuring things out. And people are like,
Yeah.
you're in the Midwest, it gets to be negative 30 degrees. Why in the heck do you have a tropical worm that should be in India? And I'm like, because I have to figure it out. That,
right.
and when you have a lot of Amazon boxes or whatever else you get, I mean, no other worm is going to go through that kind of carbon.
That's right.
I mean, they are just beasts. You can put a trash, like a 55-gallon trash bag of leaves in that bin, and it'll be gone in 2 weeks. And there's not 5 pounds of worms in there. It just levels it down to dust. So, I mean, they have absolute very specific uses. Rick, down in Australia, what kind of worms do you have? Does he have a channel?
No, he's just a subscriber.
Okay.
If you haven't already, check out Planet Obsess's channel. And also, she's got merch.
Oh, that's right.
So I got some merch. Some Planet Obsessed merch.
Yeah,
so,
it was...
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I would have been probably better prepared, but I'm in audit season at work. And so I came home, grabbed something to eat, and I was like, I've got to figure out my webcam.
Yeah, I understand that. Yep. I got up
Otherwise,
late
I would have had
myself.
my Got Worm shirt.
Oh, you're fine. No, I had a feeling I was going to get off late today. I don't know why. Yeah. And sure enough, every time I got something scheduled, you know how life, it's like,
yes.
Really?
Yep, absolutely.
But everything worked. Yep, we're connected. No issues with our internet. So thank God that things are working out. Rick says he's got red wigglers.
Yeah, 10 liters is pretty small. Is that what he started in? Is that what he said?
Yeah, red wigglers mainly in compost bin, but I've started, doing a 10-liter bin. 10-liter bins. So here's the thing. We first started out, we've been doing worms for years. And now you and I are both starting to downsize. Yeah. Is it okay to downsize with worms?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think last year, this time, I had 23 worm bins. 23. And, I'm like crazy, right? Trying to pump out 3 videos a week. And I got this project and this experiment and these bins and this, grow up bin. And this is a cocoon bin. I got blue and the twins. And I'm like losing my mind. Yeah. So I just started dumping everything in blue.
That's right. I got you.
Got rid of, a lot of bins, put them together, put the European night crawlers together. So I've got just those 2 European night crawler bins. The only red wiggler onlys is in that vertical tower. African night crawlers are only in the vermi bag. And then 1 bin of my diversity and inclusion bin, which is blue, has got all the different worms in there. So that's all I've got now. And I just rotate through them, and they get fed about every 3 weeks. But we're getting into that season where they're going to be getting a lot more bedding than they are people scraps here in the winter. Yep. And that's fine because it gets colder. They don't, in the wild, nobody's out there feeding them bananas.
That's right. You got that right.
Not in Illinois anyway. Yep.
Well, it's been about an hour.
Has it?
Do you have any, I know, exactly. Do you have any final input that you'd like to share? The floor is all yours.
Just you need worms. You do need a worm bin. And just start with that and start simple and save the world. All the worms are saving the world.
Exactly. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Ann's channel because she has plenty of great videos on worm farming.
Yep. I show the mistakes, the successes, and I try and back that all up with books that I try and get any kind of textbook or any sort of book I can find on vermiculture, and I try and read that and condense that in with the videos as well.
Mhm. Well, I'm going to throw a little trailer in there.
Okay.
I have another collaboration next month. I'm
Yeah.
going to do every third Thursday, and my next visitor is going to be Nana's Worms and Garden. So
Okay.
she's scheduled
Everybody
for
put
my
your
next live
notifications
stream.
on.
Yep.
Put your
Click your
notifications on so you
notifications.
don't miss it.
Yep. Nana's Worm Farm. Check her channel out because she has a lot of videos, and I think she has a PhD. She has a lot of wisdom. So check her channel out. She'll definitely help you out. So Heather said thank you. You have any questions for me or anything, Ann?
Nope. How many worm bins do you have now?
I had to count. I had 8. Now I'm down to 6, and I'm about to consolidate my diversity and inclusion worm bin into that junk mail worm bin. So I'll have 5. I think I'm going to have 5. I think I'm down to 5.
Yep. And if the boys don't live at home anymore, then you're going to have to go on a fresh food diet, or your worms are going to go without.
Exactly. They're eating paper and cardboard. Yeah.
Yep. It's going to be the shredded cardboard only bin. Yep.
I definitely want to take the time out to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this collaboration. You know, if you have one, look me up and I'll come to your channel. And like says, you told me a lot of tips and helped me become the successful worm farmer that I am today. So thank you for all your advice. You know, thank you for being a great YouTube worm farming friend. And I wish you the best with all your worms and your future as we move forward.
Okay. Well, as soon as we get to winter and it's no longer garden season, then that will definitely free up some time.
Oh, one more thing. What was that big thing you had? Was that like you had something big? It was a fruit, a vegetable. It was
the avocado.
Okay. It looked like a watermelon. That thing was so massive.
It's a Florida avocado. It's like one whole cereal bowl full, and that's one avocado.
That thing is a beast, bigger than my head. So
yeah,
and I'm sorry, yep. So you keep in touch, you know.
Yep.
Keep doing your videos and keep on growing, you know.
Yep. Blue's coming up this weekend.
Interest. Amen. Go ahead, load that video.
Yep.
So,
okay. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It was a nice talk.
Thank you. You too. And I want to thank all the viewers for watching us. Like, share, subscribe, and have a great day, everyone. Bye, Ann.
Bye.
Muddy thumbs up to Ann. Muddy thumbs up. See you later. Bye.